Welcome to the Undiscovered Gems podcast, hosted by NBA legend and business powerhouse Charles D. Smith, highlighting today's best and brightest business minds.
Paul Bekman, an amazing, really amazing attorney. We're going to find out a little bit what path and what journey he's taken on to create some of the great opportunities that have come along from a legal standpoint, and how he's dealt with those opportunities. And I'm Brandon Steiner. We'll be hosting this episode with Paul, and hopefully we'll learn a little bit about what it takes to be an extraordinary attorney. Paul, how are you? It's nice to see you.
Great to see you, Brandon.
How long have you been doing this, and why did you become a lawyer?
The answer to the how long is, and I'm glad you're sitting down, is 52 years. Actually, a little bit more than that. And how did I get into it? I think when I was going to school and I took an introduction to law course, I loved it, and I decided that I was going to go to law school.
Did you never be a lawyer? Like, were you one of those kids that you were like 10 years old, I'm going to be a lawyer one day?
No, it wasn't that way. It just came upon me when I was in college and I took this introduction to law course, and it got me. And I decided that I would be a lawyer.
What school was that?
I went to the University of Maryland, graduated there, and then went to the University of Maryland School of Law, which is actually located not in College Park, but in Baltimore, Maryland. And I've been here ever since.
Wow. Love that. I mean, you're a Terp. But also, I opened up the Hyatt Hotel on the Inner Harbor back in the early 80s, which was a big deal back then when the harbor was just getting started. And my career when I got started was in Baltimore for 3 years in the hotel restaurant business before I got into the sports stuff that I'm into. But I guess the question is, you didn't have any pressure to become a lawyer, because when I grew up, my mother said to be a doctor or a lawyer. This was solely you felt that this was your calling.
Yes, I did. Nobody in the family was a lawyer. My parents, neither of my parents had gone to college. They had grown up in that different era, and it sounded to me like it was the best thing to do. And I went to law school here in Baltimore, and after my first year in law school, I was a law clerk in a very, very fine law firm that gave me a lot of experience and a lot of opportunity. So when I graduated and I took the bar and I passed the bar, I went to work for the same firm as an associate, and they saw a future for me, and I had been very interested in litigation, trials. So I wasn't a lawyer, Brandon, 30 days when the senior partner came to me and said, Paul, I want you to learn how to try a case before a jury. And I'm going to give you these two cases, and you're going to do them yourself. You're going to work them up, and you're going to try them yourself. Now, I don't want you to worry about it, Paul, because these are both losers. But it'll give you the experience of trying a case before the court and a jury. So I took them, and I worked my you-know-what off, and I won both of the cases.
Can you give me an example of one of the cases was?
One of the cases actually involved a gentleman who was going to New York with a woman who was not his wife. And he was on I-95 heading north, and all of a sudden, appearing before him was a huge wreck caused by a truck that had been hit, and it had been carrying watermelons, and the watermelons were spread all across I-95. And what he did is what any reasonable person would do to avoid the incident, is move as far to the left as he could. He did that, but unfortunately he hit the truck because the truck had created this obstruction in the roadway. And the jury found that he acted reasonably, and they compensated him reasonably. And the simple answer to the case is, don't over-try it. Get to the main issue in the case and deal with that main issue, which is I exercise reasonable care under the circumstances. And the jury bought it.
Why was that a loser case, though? That seems simple, and maybe you're making it sound
because he was going to New York with a woman who was not his wife, and I was able to keep that out of the case because it was irrelevant to the issue of responsibility, negligence.
Now, before you had mentioned you were an intern there during your law school days.
Yeah, law clerk,
but
yes.
I put a lot on you. I love that because I try to urge younger people to put themselves in positions that are kind of over their head, but if you can work your way into the door, it's a beautiful thing. How'd you work your way into that door? Because it's not easy, especially back then. And what kind of things did they put on you?
So when I got the job, there was an ad in the local legal newspaper called the Daily Record. So I went for an interview. They hired me on the spot. I must have said the right things. And they gave me a lot of responsibility. At that time, the firm represented the National Maritime Union and the Seafarers International Union. Those were the
basketball in that building with the Maritime. It was that big building.
Yes.
Harbor, right?
Yes. And those two unions, of course, were ones where they were seamen. They were members of the crew of various kinds of vessels, whether they were cargo vessels, whether they were vessels that were recreational vessels. So I will tell you that they came to us if anyone had been injured on board a ship. So I started interviewing people, working up the material for the partners because I couldn't try a case. I couldn't go into court. I was still a law clerk, but they let me interview them. They let me meet them. Seamen, longshoremen, harbor workers. So I developed a very basic understanding of what's called maritime law, which is the law of the sea. Once you step off the pier, you are dealing with maritime law. And I started practicing that, and I've been practicing that ever since. So being a law clerk is something that can be very, very valuable. And not only a law clerk if you work for a law firm, but in some cases, lawyers, when you graduated law school, they go to work for a judge.
Amazing.
Whether state judge, federal judge, another great experience. I had that opportunity when I graduated, but I wanted to get into court. I wanted to try cases. So I gave up that year to be a trial lawyer. Now, in today's world, Brandon, as you know, with the complexities that go on, someone who is just hired by a law firm and starting their practice, there's no way in the world that they're going to get into court. They're going to be in that library. They're going to be working stuff up. But it's going to be quite a while before they ever get into court. But at the time that I became a lawyer, it was different. And I was very fortunate to be around at that time so that I could learn it. And once I tried those cases, I was hooked. I knew what I wanted to do.
But were you feeling that back then when they put you on the hook like this, or were you nervous and feeling like maybe they
Well, you know, if you haven't done something, if you haven't done something before, there's always a concern about being nervous. Am I going to succeed? But I have a little
confidence.
I have a little feeling about that, and I tell this to people all the time. The harder I work, the luckier I get.
But it's true, though. I mean, you go into a courtroom right out of school, a lot of kids would melt like an ice cream cone on a hot summer day.
Not my style. I'm going to be understated. I'm going to be a person who's going to learn from everything that I do, and even the things that I don't do. Sometimes learn a lot from that. But my success rate has been extremely high. I'm very fortunate because of
you could brag a bit on this program.
No, this is not bragging. This is what a lawyer should do.
Are you like one of those guys like Matthew McConaughey where you're like 200-0, like you've never lost a case?
No. The lawyer that's never lost a case has never tried a lot of cases. Okay. You do lose cases, okay? But my view is there are two things that are critical to being an effective trial lawyer. Number one is hard work. Number two is preparation. Crossing every T, dotting every I, doing what is necessary to work it up. And then when you go to court, focus yourself. Focus yourself on the fact that you don't have to kill the witness 6 times. You focus yourself on what the key issue is in the case, and you take it to the finish line. And that's the way you can be successful. What I have found, unfortunately, is a lot of lawyers who say they are trial lawyers don't go into trial. They sit at their desk and they settle their cases. If you prepare your case for settlement, you're guaranteed to go to trial. I prepare every case for trial because it enhances the chances of settlement. But a lot of lawyers settle their good cases and try their marginal ones. It should be just the opposite. Settle the marginal ones and try the big ones that are serious and the big ones that are good.
A lot of trial lawyers really look at the upside of what money can be made, either billable hours or the percentage you're getting. And that's how they're basing. I'm just saying what I felt like when I've been in litigation with attorneys. A lot of them are basing their effort and energies on how much money they can make, whether there's a case that's winnable and how much they're going to win versus if they settle and the hours you're putting towards it. And it's one of the things I hate about there's a certain type of attorney, trial attorney, that takes that approach. You kind of saw with Tom Cruise, if you remember, with A Few Good Men. You're just settling. And I'm like that. And it was really the shortcut of it all. I want to ask you one thing. Define hard work. She said there's 2 characteristics. Hard work is such a generic thing. Like, enhance that a little bit for me, what you mean by hard work.
Involves a lot of different things. First of all, it works putting in the hours, and it is not unusual, even in today's world. I work 60 or 70 hours a week.
Bill,
you want to find out what you need to find out in a case. You have to establish responsibility, liability. You have to determine what's the best way to do it. Are you going to use experts to do it? Are you going to use your client to do it? Is your client a good witness, a bad witness? You're going to take the depositions of everyone that is available, that has any knowledge of what's going on. I have investigators that go out and search, for example, in auto accidents. Are there any films? Are there video in the area? You'd be surprised. There are videos in gas stations. There are videos on the corner. People have their own videos. We search all over, for example, to determine that. So one of the things you do is liability. Second, you've got to look at what the damages are. Are the damages serious? Can you prove them? How are you going to go about proving them? Which people are you going to use, for example, to come in and testify and make an impression on the jury that this is a very serious, permanent, ongoing injury that's going to last for a lifetime, or God forbid, it's a death case. And you want to make sure that you have what's called causation, that there is a relationship between the liability, how it happened, and the damages that the person has. Duty, breach of duty, proximate cause, damages. Those are the 4 key elements. You've got to have them in every case, and you got to make sure that it is provable to a jury who is going to react. This person deserves fair and adequate compensation.
You mentioned, are you a maritime legal?
I do a lot of maritime law, but I also do a lot of medical malpractice. I do a lot of product liability. I do a lot of auto, trains, planes, all of the above.
Is it harder and harder now? You're always working on the civil end, I assume, right?
Correct.
So you're not putting anybody in jail by any stretch or anything like that.
When I was a young lawyer, I did that, but
is it harder now to get past this? Because it seems like nobody gets put in jail anymore. Does that have an effect on the civil end?
Not really, although a lot depends on where you're trying your case. You know, for example, there may be places in New York, in the state of New York, where you may be, which are much more conservative than New York City. If you're up in Buffalo, for example, it may be a lot more difficult to get a large verdict. So jurisdiction-wise can make a big difference.
Okay. you've had some monumental cases you got in the middle of. Can you share a couple?
Some,
There's been some big ones. I've looked you up, and I bet I want to be sensitive because some you may not want to talk about. But can you go through a couple of the ones that are really noteworthy and why they're noteworthy? What made them so unique?
well, I'll tell you about one that I tried just a couple of years ago down in Charlottesville, Virginia. It's one that got a lot of national press. It involved a very, very lovely young woman who was on the lacrosse team at the University of Virginia, which had a very good lacrosse team, as did the men. Her name was Yardley Love. She was in her senior year. She had a boyfriend, and her boyfriend was on the Virginia lacrosse team. Unfortunately, he had a problem, and he had a drinking problem. And they went together, they broke up, they went together, they broke up. And in their senior year, literally a month before she was to graduate, her boyfriend, whose name, it's a public record, George Ugley, got intoxicated, went up to her dorm room, which was locked, busted the door down and went in and beat her to the point that she died.
I've heard about
it was as horrendous and unimaginable as anyone could imagine. And he had been charged criminally, and he had been convicted of second-degree murder, and he went to jail, but he didn't testify at his trial. I was contacted by the family, and I recognized that, look, we may have to try this case, and it may be that there's not going to be anything there at the end of the day for compensation, for money. But I said to them after meeting with the family, I will take this case, and if necessary, I will try this case because this is a wrong. It has to be righted. And I did. And I tried the case 2 weeks in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Who did you sue?
I sued him individually. There was no coverage on his homeowner's insurance because there was a criminal acts exclusion. So he's the only person. So for several years after the incident occurred, I couldn't take his deposition. That's the question and answer period under oath, because he had filed writs of habeas corpus to set aside his criminal conviction. Filed 5 of them.
What writs? Explain what that is. Sorry.
So the writ habeas corpus is, it says to the courts, my conviction was illegally obtained. It was illegally obtained because the jury didn't consider this, didn't consider that. All rejected. 3 of them in state court, 2 of them in federal court. And after the last one was over in federal court, I noted his deposition. I issued a subpoena for him to come from jail and come to the courthouse in Charlottesville, Virginia, where I took his deposition by video. He was there, but I videotaped his deposition and used it in trial. When he appeared at trial and he was summoned to trial, the jury was out for 2 hours. I even brought in as an exhibit, Brandon, the door that he had broken down. And jury was out for 2 hours. They came back with a $15 million verdict, which will not be dischargeable in bankruptcy, which will be hanging over his head for the rest of his life. He will get out of jail shortly, and it will follow him forever.
So after killing somebody like this, brutally murdering somebody, he only got like 10 years of jail?
He actually got 23 years, but he was in jail from the time that it happened. So he's already served 14 years. So he's got 9 years to go. He got 23 years in prison for that. But it'll never, ever, ever go away from him.
So any dollar he ever earns, some of that money is going towards the 15 million. Is that how it works?
Yes, that's how it works. And here's what happened after this event occurred. Yardley's mother, Sharon Love, and her sister, Lexi, established a national foundation called the One Love Foundation. Purpose: to help young women who went to school, went to college, got into a relationship that was a bad relationship, and they offered help to them all around the country, and it exists even today all over. And that was one of the wonderful things that came out of this. Wonderful thing.
I think that is amazing, and my hats off to you for taking on a case, because, in all fairness, there's probably not a lot of money to be made having taken on that case, I'm guessing. But the 15 million, but this is what always troubles me and other friends that when we see things like this happen, is there any chance that any of that 15 million, like you hear about it in the OJ case, even too, like, is that family ever going to get any of the money? And
I believe that is going to happen. He comes from a very wealthy family.
And some of that money is already attached to him.
I'm not allowed to talk about it, but I can tell you that at the end of the day, they will be paid, and they will be paid because there's also interest that runs on the judgment.
I'm surprised they didn't settle and just try to get you the money. But anyway, good job on that. Thank you. Is there another case you wanted to talk about? Because
there's a case that's going on
about domestic violence in general, which is rampant in this country, which, for no other reason of doing this conversation, I hope people understand that these are not isolated, once-in-a-lifetime cases. These things are happening all over the country, in many schools and in many neighborhoods. Is there another case you want to talk about?
Yeah, there's a case that's really been in the papers a lot recently, and you may remember this from being in Baltimore. There's a bridge called the Key Bridge, Francis Scott Key Bridge. It goes over the Patapsco River. It's the main entry to the harbor. Baltimore has a gigantic harbor, deep water harbor. And on March 26, 2024,
This
a
just
ship
happened.
just happened. The Dali, D-A-L-I, which is 964 feet long and carrying 4,500 containers, gigantic, had hit the bridge, knocked the bridge down at 1 o'clock in the morning, a little after 1 o'clock in the morning, and there were 8 workers on the bridge working at night doing repair work. 6 of them ended up being in cars, and they went over the bridge 185 feet into the water. The entire bridge collapsed on top of them, and 6 people were killed. 2 other people were on the bridge. One was an inspector and another was a worker who went in the water and survived. They were not in a car. The other 6 died. And those cases, actually yesterday, was the deadline to file claims against that ship, the Dali. So it wasn't just anybody who investigated this. When this occurred, Brandon, the United States FBI, the National Transportation Safety Board, the U.S. Coast Guard, all went aboard the Dali right after it happened. And lo and behold,
this is a national deal because of the transportation that was necessary to go through that also caused a problem.
no question, the port was closed for remarkably only about 2 months, and then they reopened it because they really jumped on that. But there is an investigation that's been done. It's been all over the papers that there were problems with the electrical system before this happened, and days before and the day of. And that case, I represent several family members who lost their parent. And I also represent the county of Baltimore, which surrounds this bridge. And those cases are pending. Those cases will be heard here in Maryland. And every one of the people who unfortunately lost their lives has been represented. And that case is pending here in Baltimore in U.S. District Court.
2 questions. One, is it noted how big those lawsuits are? What you're suing for? Has that been?
Well, there's some lawsuits where people have filed claims for millions and millions and millions of dollars. The cost of the bridge, to rebuild the bridge, is not a million, it's billion. And They have filed what's called a action for limitation of liability, where they want to limit their liability to the value of the vessel and freight aboard at the time of the incident, which is like $46 million. However, if we're able to get over this limitation, and they have the burden of proof, the ship, that they had no knowledge of any defect that was causative to this incident, there's $4.1 billion in insurance coverage.
So this is a big case.
This is a big case, and there are a lot of lawyers that are involved. The state of Maryland is involved. The city of Baltimore is involved. The Baltimore County is involved. Hundreds of different businesses. It's a huge case.
Insurance companies, this will have a profound effect if they should lose this case, because that kind of payout was not something they were probably forecasting.
Sure, they were not.
Exactly. Now, why do they come to you? How do they come to you? Why do they come to you? I mean,
Well,
a lot of lawyers in Baltimore. How do they come to you?
Well, I've been practicing maritime law for as long as I have been a lawyer. I'm a member of what's called the Maritime Law Association of the United States, and I am what's called a proctor in admiralty. Not a proctologist, but a proctor in
But
admiralty.
take me through that. What does that mean? Is that
It means that you have demonstrated that you have knowledge and experience in the practice of maritime law. I was also on the advisory committee to the U.S. District Court for rules to be promulgated for maritime law. I've tried a lot of maritime cases, seamen, longshoremen, harbor workers, multiple death cases. So, the word gets around, and that's how I was contacted.
Are you like a wolf, like in Pulp Fiction?
I'm not like a wolf. I'm more of a gentleman.
You know what I mean? Are you the fixer?
I know exactly what you're talking.
Are there are there many guys like you that, because I've met a lot of, I've never heard a lawyer that specializes in this type of
law.
Are you like a rarity? Is a better way of putting it?
There are not a lot of lawyers that do this, particularly today. It's turned into, for a lot of lawyers, recreational crashes. But once in a while, and I tried a case last year involving a longshoreman who was very, very seriously injured on board a vessel. That went to trial here in the city, and I got a $8,678,000 verdict. But he had a brain injury. It was a terrible situation. But yes, the word gets out. When you try a case and you get a verdict, a lot of times those things become public. And, I've been involved in a lot of associations. I was president of what's called the Maryland Trial Lawyers Association. I was president of the Baltimore City Bar Association, president of the Maryland State Bar Association. So I've been around. I lecture a lot. I've done a lot of seminars. I do a lot of seminars for the National Business Institute on all types of subjects dealing with civil litigation, everything from experts to damages to maritime law, how to try a case.
So you're like one of those guys, like in Brooklyn, there's this guy, there's that guy, but when you have a guy, that's like the guy, they're like, this is the guy that can fix your car. This is the guy that can fix your roof. There's other people that do it, but this is the guy. So like
we all have that.
Guy. You're the
I'm one of the guys. I'm not the only guy. I'm one of the guys.
You're one of the guys that somebody calls when some of these types of things you've been describing in the last half hour, particularly stuff that happens on the water, seems like there's a high level of expertise. But it seems like you're a great personal injuries attorney. Because you hear a lot about all these commercials on TV and everything, but it seems like you're on a little bit of a different level.
Well, I've worked very hard to get to where I am. I don't take it for granted. And I work to train other lawyers to do the best job that they can and to be fair and not be a jerk, and to be polite and to be honest and responsible and do a good job. Right the wrong.
I like that. I'm going to hold on to that thought. In closing, are you on social media? How do people get a hold of you?
Well, we're in the world of Google. My name is Paul Bekman, Bekman. I'm in Baltimore, Maryland. I have a very fine law firm. We have 9 lawyers here. I have 3 nurses who work in our firm. I have 6 or 7 paralegals. We're a very good firm. We're a trial firm. And that's why our logo is, and my email is Bekman@mdtrialfirm.com. We fight the good fight.
I like that. Well, thanks for the conversation today. I learned a few things, not to mention, I always like talking to people that are extraordinary because it's just subtle differences that take you from good to great. And then there's those little more subtle differences that very few people get to, which take you to extraordinary. And it seems like you're just one of those guys that was not willing to settle for good or great, but wanted to be extraordinary and be the best that he could be at what you do, which I think you really, just in this conversation, I could pick up already, like, who else you going to when you come to these types of cases? It just seems like you dig down.
As I said to you, Brandon, when we started, the harder I work, the luckier I get.
And it seems like you've been a lucky man, and it seems like you enjoy the hard work, which I could appreciate. Well, thanks for joining us today. Love having you on, and hope to have future conversations about some of these other cases. They're really interesting and good life lessons.
Thank you. Been a pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Undiscovered Gems with our host, Charles D. Smith, highlighting today's best and brightest business minds. Brought to you by Pods Entertainment Group.